Sarah paused for a moment outside the glass doors of Preston Holdings, her family's empire. The winter air was sharp, biting at her skin, but not nearly as cold as the silence that always seemed to fill the boardroom whenever she entered. She glanced at her reflection. Dark circles under her eyes, jaw set, hair tied back with more determination than style. She hadn't slept much, not since the letter arrived, not since she realized what her brother had done. The receptionist nodded at her. "Good morning, Ms. Preston." Sarah forced a smile, barely. "Morning, Beth." The click of her heels echoed down the marble hallway. Each step took her past framed photos. Her father shaking hands with politicians, her brother Ryan at corporate galas, her mother smiling at charity events. Sarah was there too, but always at the edge of the picture, cropped just enough to remind her of her place. As she pushed open the heavy boardroom door, the familiar scent of leather and old cologne washed over her. Her father, Richard, sat at the head of the table, reading something on his phone. Her mother, Elizabeth, looked up with a tight, worried smile. And at the far end, Ryan, her older brother, always immaculate, always in control. He didn't look up, but Sarah felt the burn of his gaze. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. "Ah, finally." Richard's voice was impatient. "We've been waiting." Sarah took a seat, careful to keep her expression neutral. Inside, she was boiling. They were all here, just like when they were kids, except back then, it was Monopoly and not millions on the table. Ryan finally glanced up, eyes cold, calculating. "You got our letter, I assume." Sarah nodded. She set her bag down and withdrew the legal notice. "I did. You're claiming I authorized the transfer of my shares to you, that I signed away my rights." A smirk flickered at the corner of Ryan's mouth. "That's what the papers say, Sarah." Richard set his phone down. "Is there a problem? Everything's in order. We're simply formalizing the transition." Sarah's voice was steady. "Except those aren't my signatures." For a second, the room was silent, dangerously silent. Elizabeth's fingers fluttered nervously on her teacup. "Maybe there's some mistake." "There's no mistake," Ryan interrupted, gaze locked on Sarah. "You always said you didn't want to be part of this. Consider it handled." Sarah gripped the table's edge, her knuckles white. In that moment, she understood. This wasn't just about money or control. This was about erasing her own brother, her own family, writing her out of her own life. And as she looked at the faces around the table, she realized she was utterly, completely alone. But not defeated. Not yet. It hadn't always been war. There was a time, not so long ago, when the Preston house had been alive with laughter. Sarah remembered Sunday mornings in the old kitchen, her mother humming along with the radio, her father sneaking pieces of toast off her plate, and Ryan, the golden child, older by 4 years, helping her with math homework at the counter. Back then, their father's business was just a mid-sized firm. Richard used to tell them, "One day Preston Holdings will be the biggest name in the city. And when that day comes, both of you, my brilliant kids, will lead it together." He always made it sound like a promise. But children learn fast that promises can bend. Sarah was sharp, even as a child. She had a gift for numbers and a curiosity that sometimes made adults uncomfortable. Ryan, on the other hand, was charismatic, effortlessly charming, the kind of boy teachers adored and Richard bragged about at dinner parties. For a long time, Sarah didn't mind. She loved her big brother, even envied him a little. She remembered the summer she turned 15, the first time she beat Ryan at chess. He slammed the board shut so hard the pieces flew everywhere. "You got lucky," he snapped and stormed out of the room. Their mother found Sarah later, quietly putting the chess pieces back into their box. "Your brother's just under pressure," Elizabeth said softly, brushing a stray curl behind Sarah's ear. "He feels like he has to be perfect." "Why?" Sarah had asked. Elizabeth hesitated, then smiled. "Because he's the oldest. But you—" She squeezed Sarah's hand. "You have your own light. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." But slowly, as the company grew, so did the distance between the siblings. Richard was rarely home, often away on business trips. When he was home, he talked mostly to Ryan about quarterly reports and market trends. Sara listened from the hallway, wishing he would ask her about her science fair project or the essay she'd written for the city competition. By the time Sara left for university in London, she and Ryan spoke less and less. At her graduation, Ryan arrived late and left early, citing urgent business. Richard shook her hand, formal as a CEO, and said, "We're proud of you. Make us even prouder." Still, Sara never lost hope that things would change. After her MBA, she returned home full of ideas, ways to modernize the company, expand into new markets, invest in tech startups. But every boardroom she entered felt colder, the seats already taken. Ryan, now vice president, had surrounded himself with loyalists, men who nodded at his every word. One night, after a particularly tense board meeting, Sara found her father in his study. "Dad, I want to do more. I know I can help." Richard barely looked up from his laptop. "Let your brother handle it, Sara. He understands the company's needs. You should focus on the charity wing. It's more fitting." Sara left the room with her chest burning, the sting of those words staying with her for years. From then on, it was as if an invisible line was drawn down the middle of the Preston family. On one side, Ryan, destined heir, living out the future Richard had dreamed for his son. On the other, Sara, the spare, told to keep quiet and not make trouble. Even Elizabeth, ever the peacemaker, found herself torn, doting on Ryan's triumphs but sneaking Sara's favorite books onto her bedside table. The years blurred by. Sara built the company's charity program into one of the city's most respected. She worked late, traveled far, raised the profile of Preston Holdings' philanthropic work. But every headline, every award, seemed to vanish in Ryan's shadow. Still, there were moments when Sara caught a glimpse of the brother she once adored, a soft joke at a family dinner, a rare shared smile. But those moments never lasted. Ryan was restless, anxious, driven by a need to prove himself, especially as Richard's health began to fade. His ambition became sharper, his temper quicker. Sara tried to bridge the gap more than once, but every olive branch was met with indifference or worse, subtle sabotage. She'd propose a new initiative, and Ryan would find a way to undercut it in the next meeting. She'd gather allies only to find them quietly shifting to Ryan's side. The house that once echoed with laughter now felt full of closed doors and whispered conversations. In all those years, Sara never truly believed her brother would cross a line. Betray her, maybe. Undermine her, certainly. But outright fraud? Forgery? It wasn't just a question of trust. It was a question of blood. And now, as she sat across from him in the boardroom, the past pressed down on her, heavy and cold. Maybe she should have seen it coming. Maybe she should have fought harder sooner, but she was here now. And if Ryan wanted a war, she would give him one. It began, like so many betrayals, with a letter. A crisp white envelope, embossed with the Preston Holdings seal, slid quietly through the mail slot of Sara's modest downtown apartment. She almost ignored it. She'd grown used to the company's endless stream of paperwork, event invitations, tax notices, glossy newsletters full of self-congratulation and family photo ops. But this one felt different. Her name was written in cold block letters, M.S. Sara Preston. Inside was a formal notice, printed on thick, expensive paper. "Dear Ms. Preston, this is to confirm your consent to the voluntary transfer of your shares in Preston Holdings to Mr. Ryan Preston, effective immediately. Please find attached your signed authorization forms and legal documentation, as per company policy and the family trust agreement." Sara froze, scanning the words again. Consent. Signed authorization. There must be a mistake. Heart pounding, she turned to the back. Several pages were clipped together. Official forms, company seals, and at the bottom, her own name in ink. Except it wasn't her signature. Her hand shook as she held the paper up to the light. It looked almost perfect. Fluid, confident, the looping S and sharp downstroke of the P. But Sara knew her own handwriting as intimately as she knew her reflection, and there was a stiffness to these letters, a hesitation at the end of her name, a detail no forger could quite master. She called the company office. The receptionist transferred her to the legal department. The woman on the line sounded bored, almost annoyed. Ms. Preston, all the paperwork is in order. The transfer was initiated by you last month, correct? No, Sarah said sharply. I never authorized any transfer. Those are not my signatures. A pause. Ms. Preston, I'm looking at your file right now. The forms have your name and a notary stamp. Everything seems legitimate. Sarah's pulse roared in her ears. I want to see the originals, and I want a meeting with the board today. The woman hesitated. I'll have to check with Mr. Ryan Preston. Sarah hung up, fury and fear mixing in her chest. She reached for her phone and dialed her mother. Elizabeth answered on the second ring. Sarah, is everything all right? Sarah's voice trembled, but she pushed through. Did you know about this? The share transfer? Silence on the other end. Ryan mentioned something about restructuring, but I didn't. Sarah, are you sure this isn't a misunderstanding? It's not a misunderstanding, Mom. It's a setup. Sarah stared at the papers on her desk. Her own name, forged, stamped, made official by people who were supposed to love her. In that moment, the truth was as clear as day. This was no accident. It was an attack, launched quietly, in her own name, and she was done being silent. The rest of that day was a blur of anger, calls, and restless pacing. By sunset, Sarah had filled a notebook with frantic scrawls, names, numbers, and half-formed strategies. Her instincts screamed at her to do something, to fight back, but a part of her still didn't want to believe the truth. Ryan had crossed the line. Her brother had forged her signature and stolen what was rightfully hers. She needed proof. Sarah's first call was to Mark, her old friend from university, the only lawyer she trusted. Mark, I need your help. It's urgent. She met him that evening at a quiet cafe, a world away from the gleaming towers of Preston Holdings. Mark listened without interrupting as she laid out the facts. The letter, the forged documents, the company's silence. He flipped through the paperwork with practiced eyes. It's sophisticated, he admitted. Whoever did this knows what they're doing, but it's not flawless. I can already see a couple of inconsistencies in the signature. And look, this notary stamp? It's digital, not embossed. If we dig, we might find something. Sarah let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. I just never thought Ryan would do this. Mark hesitated. Sarah, sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. This isn't just corporate sabotage, this is personal. You need to prepare for a fight. She nodded. I want to see every piece of paper they've filed in my name for the last year. I want to check every email, every security log. If Ryan wants a war, he'll get one. That night, Sarah barely slept. She replayed every interaction with Ryan over the last few months, searching for clues. His icy politeness, the veiled warnings at board meetings, the way he dismissed her ideas with a smirk. All of it seemed, in hindsight, to point to this moment. The next morning, she was at the company headquarters before sunrise. She avoided the main entrance, instead slipping in through the parking garage with her old employee keycard, one she'd kept just in case. She made her way to the IT department, where James, a former finance officer recently pushed out by Ryan, worked nights doing freelance tech support. James, I need a favor, she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. James blinked, surprised but not unwilling. What kind of favor? I need access to the digital signature logs. Everything with my name on it for the last 12 months. I know it's a lot, but... James interrupted, lowering his voice. Ryan had me do something odd a few weeks back. He wanted a digital backup of every director's signature on file. Said it was for security updates. I didn't ask questions at the time, but now I wish I had. Sarah's heart raced. Did you keep any of the originals? Any copies? He nodded. Yeah, they're on a secure drive. I didn't delete them. I had a bad feeling. She nearly hugged him. You might have just saved me. By noon, Sarah and Mark sat in his office, poring over emails and signature logs. Mark leaned back, frowning. See this? The timestamp on the authorization form predates the login activity on your account by 2 days. There's no way you signed this document from your own device. Sarah's hands trembled as she realized the implications. Ryan had not only forged her signature, he'd created an entire digital trail to make it look real, but he hadn't accounted for James, or for Mark's sharp legal mind. I think we have enough to start building a case, Mark said, his tone steely. We'll need a forensic handwriting expert to confirm the forgery, and if we're lucky, we might catch the notary in a lie. That afternoon, Sarah and Mark paid a visit to Dr. Stephen, a respected digital forensic specialist. Dr. Stephen peered at the documents through his magnifying glass, comparing signatures, analyzing pressure points, and running them through software that mapped the strokes pixel by pixel. This is clever, he muttered, but not clever enough. See here, the S is almost perfect, but the tail of the P doesn't match your normal handwriting. Also, the pressure on the final loop is inconsistent with your usual signature. I can provide a report. You have enough to challenge this in court. A wave of relief crashed over Sarah, quickly replaced by fresh determination. Ryan's not going to get away with this, she said quietly. But the reality was settling in. If she went forward, there would be no going back. This would mean public scandal, fractured family, a permanent rift between siblings. She looked out the window, watching the city move beneath a slate gray sky. Ryan had made his move. Now it was her turn, and this time she wouldn't hold back. Night settled over the city, casting long shadows through Sarah's apartment windows. The glow from her laptop screen was the only light in the room. Emails, forensic reports, scanned legal documents. They blurred together as exhaustion tugged at her eyelids. Outside, distant traffic hummed. Inside, silence pressed in like a second skin. She hadn't heard from her father all day. Richard had left for a conference in Singapore. His assistant's only text a chilly, "Mr. Preston is unavailable for comment." Sarah's mother, Elizabeth, answered her calls with careful words but little substance. "I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding, darling. Ryan's under so much pressure." The more Sarah pressed, the further Elizabeth retreated, hiding behind worry and vague promises to talk to your brother soon. Sarah's chest ached, not from the betrayal, but from the emptiness that followed. Her family, once her fortress, now felt like strangers holding up the walls. She was on her own. Late that night, her phone vibrated. A message from Mark. "I've scheduled a meeting with Dr. Stephen for the full report. Stay strong. Don't let Ryan's silence shake you. You're not crazy, Sarah." She read it twice, the words echoing louder than she expected. Am I crazy? For a split second, she wondered if there was some truth in Ryan's story. If maybe she had forgotten signing something. If maybe she was overreacting. But then she looked at the forged signature again, the callous curve of the S that didn't belong to her, and she knew. This was real. Her mind drifted back to childhood. Ryan helping her fix a scraped knee, whispering secrets under the old oak tree in their backyard, promising he'd always protect her. She clung to those memories, but they felt like they belonged to another life. What had changed them so completely? Was it the money? The business? Or something darker, older, that had always been there, waiting to come out? The weight of loneliness pressed harder. Sarah stood and walked to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water with trembling hands. She stared out the window at the dark city, where every glowing apartment seemed to belong to someone with a family, a team, a place to belong. She had Mark, yes, and James. But no one else knew what this felt like. To be erased by your own blood. Her phone buzzed again. This time, an old friend from college, Rachel. "Heard what's happening at Preston Holdings. If you need to talk, I'm here. You're not alone." Sarah blinked back unexpected tears. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she felt. But the worst part wasn't the anger. It was the sadness. The sharp, aching knowledge that her own brother, her first friend, her oldest rival, had decided she didn't matter anymore. She took a deep breath and forced herself back to the desk. There would be time to grieve later. For now, she had to stay strong. She had to keep fighting, not just for her future, but for the truth. Because if she stopped, even for a moment, she feared she might disappear completely. By dawn, Sarah's fear had crystallized into focus. She brewed strong coffee, tied her hair back, and opened her laptop. No more hesitating. Ryan had built his case on silence and shadows, but Sara knew the truth would leave traces, even if he thought he'd covered every step. Her first move, digital forensics. She emailed James and asked him to meet her at the office before anyone else arrived. He was already waiting by the time she slipped in through the staff entrance, his expression nervous but determined. I went through the server logs last night, James whispered, guiding her to a quiet corner. There's something you should see. On his screen, he pulled up a log of system access over the past 3 months. Look at this. 3 weeks ago, someone logged in under your account. But you were in London at the time, right? Sara nodded, heart pounding. I have boarding passes, emails. I can prove I wasn't even in the country. James smiled for the first time all week. That's your alibi. But there's more. Ryan asked IT to disable the security camera in the executive office that same night. That's not standard protocol. It's a cover-up. Sara felt a rush of hope. Can you get a record of who requested that? He nodded. Already have it. Ryan's assistant sent the request, on his direct orders. They backed up all the evidence. Server logs, emails, even a copy of the suspicious notary's digital stamp, which James had flagged as being used before on another questionable document months ago. The puzzle pieces were finally connecting. Her next stop was Dr. Stephen's lab, where the forensic report was nearly finished. Dr. Stephen was meticulous, mapping every curve of the signatures, using pressure analysis and side-by-side overlays. Take a look, Sara, he said, handing her a printed report. Not only do the signatures not match, but the forgery uses a scan from an old loan document. See the smudge here? Whoever copied your signature, they didn't clean up the image. I can testify to this in court. Sara's relief nearly overwhelmed her. She thanked him, promising to update Mark with the new findings. That afternoon, Mark convened a meeting in his office. He, Sara, James, and Dr. Stephen gathered around a cluttered table, stacking their evidence into organized files. Mark was all business. We have what we need for an injunction, he said. The fake signature, the digital alibi, the tampered security footage, all of it. And if we bring in the notary for questioning, we might get them to admit to fraud. James spoke up, more confident now. And if we check with the registry office, maybe we'll find more documents Ryan's tampered with. Mark nodded. We'll need everything airtight. Ryan has money, influence, and a legal team, but he doesn't have the truth. That's our advantage. Sara sat back, absorbing the moment. For the first time since the nightmare began, she felt less like a victim and more like a fighter. Ryan's house of cards was starting to wobble. She was ready to blow it down, but she also knew the hardest part was coming. She would have to stand in the open, expose her family's secrets, and risk losing them forever. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Let's finish this." The Preston family name had always opened doors. Now it filled the city's courthouse with whispers. Reporters lingered in the marble corridors, their cameras ready, hoping for a glimpse of the scandal playing out behind closed doors. Sara sat in the plaintiff's seat, her posture rigid, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Mark sat beside her, reviewing the organized stack of evidence with cool professionalism. Across the aisle, Ryan lounged at the defense table in a tailored navy suit, exuding a calm confidence that made Sara's stomach twist. Richard and Elizabeth sat behind their children, her father unreadable, her mother pale and anxious, twisting a handkerchief in her lap. Judge Martin entered, his presence commanding instant respect. Court is now in session, he announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. The proceedings began quickly. Mark rose, outlining the case: fraudulent transfer of shares, forged signatures, digital evidence of tampering, and a conspiracy to disinherit Sara. The courtroom murmured as Mark presented the timeline, then called Dr. Stephen as the first witness. Dr. Stephen approached the stand, his forensic report in hand. Mark led him through the technical details: how the signature on the authorization form had been copied from an old document, how digital analysis revealed clear inconsistencies, and how the supposed notarized stamp had been fraudulently reused. Judge Martin frowned. Are you prepared to swear under oath that this signature is a forgery? Dr. Stephen nodded, his voice steady. Yes, Your Honor, the evidence is irrefutable. Next came James, who described the server logs and the security camera blackout. Mark guided him gently. James, did you see any login activity on Miss Preston's account while she was traveling abroad? Yes, sir. The logins happened while she was out of the country, and the security cameras in the executive office were disabled at Ryan Preston's request. Ryan's lawyer, Mr. Clark, objected several times, insisting the evidence was circumstantial or inadmissible. But Judge Martin, sharp and impatient with theatrics, overruled him each time. Finally, it was time for the defense. Ryan stood, feigning hurt. My sister has always felt she deserved more. She never cared for the business the way I did. This is a family matter, not a legal one. All I ever wanted was to do what's best for Preston Holdings. Mr. Clark presented documents, emails, even a family video, anything to portray Ryan as the responsible heir. But each time, Mark countered with evidence. Sarah's alibi, the tampered emails, the forensic report. The defense's arguments weakened with every passing minute. Then Mark called the notary public to the stand. The notary, pale and sweating, admitted under questioning that Ryan had pressured him to approve the documents without proper verification. At last, Sarah herself was called. She stood before the judge, every eye on her, her family's legacy at stake. Sarah, Mark began, did you ever authorize the transfer of your shares to your brother? Sarah met Ryan's gaze. Never. I devoted my life to this company, to my family. I would never give up my legacy, certainly not to someone willing to steal it. Ryan glared at her, his mask slipping for just a second. Sarah saw the old brother in that look, hurt, desperate, furious. But she also saw the man who'd betrayed her. Mark finished with a quiet, powerful statement. Your Honor, every piece of evidence points to one truth. Sarah smiled, the pain a little lighter. I wish things could have been different, but maybe now they finally can be. Before leaving, she wandered through her old bedroom, her childhood trophies, her first science projects still pinned to the wall. She felt something shifting, a release of the weight she'd carried for so long. Back at work, Sarah launched a new initiative, the Preston Foundation for Women in Business, offering scholarships and leadership programs. She watched as the first group of young women came through the doors, their faces full of hope. In them, she saw not just her own past, but the possibility of a better future. Redemption wasn't about erasing the pain or forgetting the betrayal. It was about building something stronger, brick by brick, on ground she'd claimed for herself. Sarah knew she couldn't heal every wound or mend every broken bond, but she could choose what happened next. And that, finally, was enough. One evening, as dusk settled over the city, Sarah found herself alone in the Preston Holdings boardroom. The long table, once a battlefield of power plays and silent accusations, was now scattered with plans, not schemes, blueprints for the company's future, and proposals for the foundation she'd started. She walked to the window, watching the city lights flicker on, one by one. Down below, people hurried home to their families. Sarah thought of the word family, how it could mean warmth but also betrayal. How, in the end, it was up to her to redefine it. She took out Ryan's letter, rereading the apology. She still didn't know if forgiveness would ever come, but she felt the edge of her anger softening just a little. Sometimes healing wasn't about mending old wounds, but building something new around them. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mark. First scholarship recipient accepted. Thought you'd want to know. Sarah smiled, pride swelling in her chest. She could picture a new generation of women stepping into the spaces she'd had to fight for, doors now opened, not locked. She thought about the journey that brought her here. The betrayal, the courtroom battles, the lonely nights, and the small, fierce victories that built her resilience. She'd lost a version of her family, but she'd found something else. Her voice, her place, and the courage to make space for others. Sarah turned off the lights, letting the boardroom fade into darkness behind her. She stepped into the hallway, heels clicking softly on polished floors. There was no applause, no crowd, just the quiet satisfaction of having stood her ground. She realized she no longer needed the approval she'd once chased so desperately. She was enough, and so was the life she was building. As she walked out into the evening air, Sarah felt the future wide open before her. There would be hard days ahead and memories she might never fully escape, but there would also be hope and a foundation that would outlast every shadow. She walked away from the building that night not as a victim, nor as the forgotten daughter, but as the architect of her own legacy. And that was how her story would begin. Again.